I'm 73 years old. My wife, Susan, died 6 years ago, and the night she said her last words to me was the moment I finally understood something I had been avoiding for most of my life. I thought I had time. I didn't. I'm starting here because anything softer would be dishonest. When you watch the person you built your life around disappear in 4 months, you don't open with reflection. You open with absence. Susan was diagnosed in March. Pancreatic cancer. By July, she was gone. 4 months is a strange amount of time. Long enough to believe there's hope. Short enough to make every belief feel foolish afterward. The house changed immediately, not in big ways, in small ones. Her shoes stayed by the door longer than they should have. Her mug stayed on the counter, clean, unused. The television sounded louder because no one commented on it anymore. Silence moved in without asking. This isn't a story about bravery. Susan wasn't poetic at the end. She was tired, honest, practical. And that's why what she said to me stayed. But before I get there, I need to tell you what my life looked like before everything cracked open. Because the mistake wasn't obvious. It never is. In my 20s and 30s, I did what made sense. I worked. I focused on being reliable. I believed showing up every day was the same thing as being present. Susan and I talked about the future the way people do when they assume it's generous. We weren't unhappy. That matters. We laughed. We paid bills. We hosted dinners. From the outside, our life looked steady. And I took that as proof that nothing needed changing. I used to think regret came from bad decisions. I didn't make bad decisions. I made reasonable ones. And that's exactly how I got here. I stayed late at work because it felt responsible. I postponed trips because the timing wasn't right. I half listened to conversations because I assumed we'd finish them later. I thought consistency would protect us. This is the part people don't warn you about. A life can look solid and still be quietly thinning. At 67, something shifted. I had retired. For the first time, my days were open. I thought freedom would turn into closeness. It doesn't work like that. Even sitting across from Susan, my attention was trained elsewhere, leaning into tomorrow, assuming time could always be spent later. I didn't notice it when it started. I noticed it when it was already normal. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was a doctor's office, antiseptic in the air. Susan squeezing my hand a little harder than usual. The doctor was careful. Too careful. On the drive home, the radio stayed off. At a red light, Susan looked at me and said, "I don't think we have as long as we thought." That sentence didn't scare me the way it should have. I told myself medicine had advanced. People beat the odds. I told myself what I'd always told myself, we have time. That belief collapsed later, completely, without mercy. Her illness rearranged our days, appointments, pill bottles, a calendar full of things I couldn't fix. I tried to be helpful. I organized. I handled logistics. What I didn't do enough of was stop. One afternoon, she left me a voicemail. Her voice was weaker. She said, "When you get back, can you just sit with me for a while?" I did, but I checked my phone. I answered an email. I told myself it could wait. I didn't make it wait. By the time I understood what those small choices cost, the bill had already been paid. On her last day, the light in the room was dull, late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look unfinished. She asked me to lean closer. She said, "You were always so busy being responsible." Then she paused. and I kept thinking there would be more time. That was it. She died a few hours later. I replay that moment not because it's dramatic, but because it was precise. It named something I had avoided naming for decades. After the funeral, people checked in, then they stopped. That's not cruelty. That's life moving on. But when it does, you're left alone with the truth you didn't have time to hear before. The empty side of the bed became impossible to ignore. I started waking up early, reaching out, finding nothing. Habit failing again and again. I began noticing objects instead of routines. Her coat still hanging by the door. Book she was reading, folded open at the same page. The chair she always sat in, worn slightly more on one armrest. These details didn't hurt because they were sentimental. They hurt because they proved how much I'd been missing while everything was still intact. I don't regret my career. I don't regret providing. Those things mattered in their way. What I regret are the moments I treated as replaceable, the conversations I rushed, the evenings I filled with noise instead of listening, the times I thought being nearby was the same as being there. You probably think you'll notice when it's happening. I thought I would too. You won't. Life doesn't announce when it starts charging interest on delay. I see couples now, younger than we were, distracted in familiar ways, phones out, minds elsewhere. I recognize the posture, the assumption that the important parts will wait patiently. They don't. This isn't advice. I wouldn't have listened either. I'm not saying do this or don't do that. I'm just telling you what happened when I kept believing responsibility was enough. Time didn't punish me. It just stopped cooperating. These days, I sit with the quiet more willingly, not because it's comforting, but because it's honest. I let memories come without rushing past them. There's no fixing what's gone. That's the part people struggle with. They want a way back. There isn't one. Acceptance isn't peace. It's clarity without options. If there's one thing that's true at 73, it's this. Nothing disappears loudly. It leaves in pieces. In ordinary moments, you don't think to hold on to. That's what Susan's last words gave me. Not wisdom, not comfort, accuracy. If you want, say what you keep postponing. Just one sentence. And if you don't, that's fine too. I'll still be here some mornings, sitting with what's left, wishing I'd understood sooner.